Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar. My name is Alec McCutcheon. I'm a Director of Unicom and we're absolutely delighted to be hosting today's presentation. The theme of the webinar today is, I think, very topical at the moment. It's the path to become a certified Agile Coach. In the webinar, you're going to hear some ideas about Agile coaching and new tools and techniques, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our presenter, who we've worked with for many years, Graham Dick. Graham is Director of Flexible Thinking. He's a highly experienced Agile coach, facilitator, mentor, trainer and consultant with lots of experience. I think over 25 years of getting his hands dirty with real-life projects and organisations, and much of his career has been around Agile. I'm absolutely delighted now to hand over to Graham, and I would just mention that at the end of the webinar there is plenty of opportunity for questions, so do please feel free to put questions to Graham if you'd like his thoughts, feedback. Please just type into the text box and we'll endeavour to get through as many of the questions as possible. Graham, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Alec. Okay, good afternoon everybody. So I'm very pleased to be here and talking with you. And what we're as Alec was saying, we're going to talk about the kind of path to become a certified Agile Coach. And I kind of thought we'd put this in kind of two halves really, the talk. I guess the first kind of half to two-thirds really. I'm going to call out some of the kind of things that we actually address in our Agile our Agile Coaching class itself. So just some of the little nuggets I think are quite that are really quite important and relevant to the job of an Agile Coach, so to speak. And then really the last little bit of the class, I really kind of zoom in on the kind of actual sort of certification path itself and sort of put an Agile Coaching class into context. And then as Alex says at the end, we've got plenty of time for any questions at all that folk want to ask at the end. So I shall get cracking. We go. Okay. So I guess first of all, I guess the question is kind of, well, what is an Agile Coach? And that's it's a good question. And I guess at the highest level, where we kind of think of it is really the role you're there. Your job is to support typically a number of teams implement Agile. And so it's really it's not necessarily about working with one team, or that may well be the case. Often a coach will be working across a number of teams, supporting them, and the teams will be at various stages in their development. And so really it's about helping that team understand and implement Agile in whatever flavour or shape Agile is taking inside that team or that organisation. It's secondly then about helping. It's not just about stopping there. Agile is a journey, really from just starting and learning the basics through to mastery, and it doesn't stop there. It's a continual journey to high performance. And that really is the important thing about Agile. It's about us delivering a regular cadence value to the business, to our customers, to our organisation. Stuff that actually helps that organisation do things better, that it helps its customers do achieve their goals more effectively. So it's kind of about implementing Agile and then helping that team then move and be more and more effective with Agile to become more and more high performing as a team. So there's those two dimensions which are kind of working with the team. There's kind of this third dimension, which is, well, kind of how does the coach do that? Well, fundamentally, it's about this word models, about role modeling. The Agile Coach is an absolute living role model of the Agile values and principles, and at the most fundamental level, that really is what the coach is doing and how a coach is working. Is role modeling in his own personal behaviours, those values and principles. And then lastly, it's not just about a team focus. It's a continual engagement and conversation and dialogue with a wider organisation, kind of looking up from the team, helping that organisation better understand Agile and really kind of mirror as the team grows and evolves and hits the inevitable challenges and issues. It's working with management to mirror that development and mirror that journey, such that management move on that journey as well, and form slowly better and better understand what Agile is and what it can do for their organisation. You know, if they will only let those teams exploit it better and indeed exploit it themselves. Okay, so in terms of, again, now digging into a little bit more, so what's the coach do? Primarily, the coach is going to go and work with one or more Agile team members. He's going to coach those individuals, and to do that, the coach is going to use his or her Agile knowledge and their Agile experience and their Agile thinking. So that thinking is bringing into life the values and principles from the manifesto, bringing them into life. The knowledge and Agile knowledge and experience is, Agile knowledge is a coach needs to be an expert in whatever methodology or set of methodologies is being used and employed inside the organisation itself. And then the experience is, it's just been there, you know, seen it before, got the t-shirt, can work this one through. You know, there's never a complete cut and shift of a solution from another organisation or another part of the same organisation. You know, every problem is kind of unique, but often we've seen similar problems before. And that is that having that experience there that helps the Agile coach there work with the team members in their own unique context, because there's always something, you know, unique about a team, even though so many teams are in essence very, very similar and the challenges they face are often very similar. There's always a unique context-specific part to it. But it's helping that team get over those problems, get more effective at using Agile, and really moving them from the point of almost like, well, we've got a problem, solve it for us, into actually starting to solve their own problems, starting to gain Agile knowledge, and starting to actually experiment, starting to not be frightened of failure, but to crack on and say, well, actually, let's try and do this. What's the worst that's going to happen? You know, we'll have some problems in the sprint, and we can adjust again. So it's starting to sort of almost free people up so they can do that. And you know, experiences, I think, is fascinating, because I mean, it's things like, for example, when a new team of new individuals getting together, often there'll be an awful lot of, you know, there can be a lot of conflict, a lot of friction between team members, especially passionate kind of team members who are passionate about the subject. And as a coach, you actually know that it's sooner or later, with your guide, you know, with some help from you, and guidance from yourself, the team will get through that stage, and they will form, and they will become a performing team with a bunch of individuals who actually, yeah, they don't have to be best mates, but professionally they can get on with each other and they can understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. And as an experienced coach, you can kind of sit through that period of friction, of personal challenges, interpersonal challenges, and know that you'll get the guys through that. You know, and that comes with experience, and that's, I guess, the experience angle on that. Okay, so then we can kind of then sort of blend in here. There's a number of kind of coaching behaviours, because it's kind of say, again, at the highest level, what on earth does the coach do? Well, you're going to use this set of techniques here. Starting, I guess, at the bottommost thing is kind of, I've got it there, is consulting. All that actually means is doing the work for the team, and that's really not a good place to be. You know, I mean, it's no disrespect, but you're there effectively then as a team member, playing a role as a team member, and you know, your value is minimised at that point, and the organisation is not getting the best return on your involvement, and we'll talk about that little term a little bit later. So it's not a good place to be. We need to actually have the team stepping up and doing stuff for themselves, and we act as their guide. So then we're going to get some other roles we kind of play. We can play kind of the facilitator role. That's where we're facilitating. We're using facilitation skills to make all those day-to-day interactions just work more effectively. make sure that meetings, interactions, discussions actually have a purpose and a point. Dare I say it, a word and agenda. It doesn't have to be all formalized, but just having, a thought about, well, what we're trying to achieve with this session, using facilitation techniques to cope with, to kind of open up discussion and get people involved, perhaps get the quieter members of the team, actually get their involvement into a discussion, and kind of almost get the more dominant people just to kind of park down for a minute. So there's a bunch of facilitation techniques to kind of help you achieve that, and also then techniques to help perhaps a group of individuals with quite divergent views to actually try and converge together and form some sort of consensus or agreement on what a next step might be. And often it's a case of, well, it's something that people can live with. They don't have to be in violent agreement, but it's something they can live with. It's potentially, it will do. So it's kind of you're facilitating there. Teaching is actually putting a hat on and saying, right, okay, hang on guys, there's a misunderstanding here. I'm now going to teach. I'm going to teach estimation. I'm going to teach how sprint planning happens and what its intent is and what it's meant to do. So it's actually dropping into, literally it's going to teaching mode and say, right, guys, teaching mode, take pen, teach how something happens, and then go back to facilitating it's happening. I think got mentoring and coaching, and they're kind of interesting. There's often people get a bit confused between the two, and the two often hand off with each other. I think the fundamental difference is coaching often is it's very, very focused on what's the personal agenda of the team member you're working with. We're trying to work with them to help them solve their own problem. So doing a lot of listening. I introduced a term here, kind of these powerful questions, which we'll talk a bit about later. And also very much self-managing yourself. We talked earlier about role modeling coaching behaviours, and one of those behaviours one needs to role model is based self-management. Actually keep my mouth shut, because I often will have a solution because I've been there and got the t-shirt, but it's not for me to just dump that solution onto that team member. What I want them to do is to come up with a solution themselves and then give it a go, and that really is the key to coaching. Mentoring kind of adds on to that a layer which is about, it's often focused just with one person, and it often is something that's going to happen over a period of time, and it's very much it's a different kind of complementary but different relationship that happens over a period of time, with very much a very defined beginning, and okay, what are we going to work with together? Where do you feel weak? Where do you feel strong? Okay, let's work with that. And it's a kind of supportive mentee-mentor relationship, where the mentor will very much support the mentee as the mentee builds their experience and builds confidence. Classic thing here might be that you'll be coaching your agile team, coaching your product owner, but you might also in parallel have a mentoring relationship with your product owner who's maybe new to this whole agile thing and just needs support offline to get his or her head moved from that kind of waterfall world where they were into this agile world, and the different but complementary ways of working. To be running those relationships kind of in parallel. Okay, and then we sort of dig in a bit more there and say, okay, what about this? What does the coach do? And primarily, this is kind of often ask the question, well, how do I coach? What does coaching actually involve? And this kind of little diagram here, this idea, this conversational arc, tries to just kind of actually kind of focus in on that and see what it's about. And the first step there is it's about issue identification. It's about spotting a problem. And sometimes the problem will just be the challenge will be absolutely apparent, and present it, come and say, hey, look, we're really stuck with this. Okay, fine. Other times, the team maybe won't actually know what the problem is. They won't even be seeing have a problem, but as the coach, you can see that. And so you actually need to engage the team in a discussion, in a conversation. And that conversation might involve a lot of venting, or people just getting stuff off their chests. It might involve you, it probably almost will involve you, asking some kind of deep open questions. Kind of, how do you feel about this? What sort of effect does this have? Is this having? Do you think there might be a different way of doing this? Those sorts of questions. And then kind of doing some clarification as well as you start focusing in, you discover, and there starts building an understanding of what the issue is. Then asking clarifying questions to make sure we've got a clear, consistent view of what actually the issue is that we need to address. We then move the conversation into issue exploration, which is where you're basically saying, okay, well, what could we do about that? And this is where we're trying to engage that either the person or the group of people we're coaching into coming up with a solution themselves, something they might do differently to help address the problem. And this is where you might want to get them to, that, you know, if people are struggling, if they're drying up, maybe you get them to facilitate a little brainstorming session to help come up with some ideas, and then some dot voting or something to come up with a solution. It doesn't have to be the best solution. It doesn't have to be, you know, the perfect solution. It just needs to be something that moves them forward and try something out, get them to try something different out, and start embracing that spirit of constantly trying to improve, trying to do stuff differently, trying to experiment. So issue exploration is trying to get them to open up. We've figured out what the issue is in our identification phase of the conversation, and then it's about saying, okay, what might we do to fix that? Let's come up with a solution, and then it's getting some commitment to actually do that. So, okay, guys, when are we going to do that? When are we actually going to, you know, do that fix that we've just talked about? You know, we said that, okay, the fix we're going to do is we're actually going to start story pointing, because we haven't been doing that yet, and it's been causing us these problems in terms of not understanding what our capacity is in the team for the next sprint. So we keep taking too much on board. So let's try story pointing. We've kind of fluffed around it before because we haven't understood it, right? Are we going to commit? You know, what's the commitment? Okay, we'll commit to bring it in the next sprint planning. Okay, fine. So it's kind of something that's measurable, something that you can commit to the team or the individual can actually commit to. And then as coach, you actually kind of make a little mental note in your head. You trust the guys to do that, but you're actually going to be there and work as their conscience to kind of come back round and say, you know what, guys, when we did sprint planning, we kind of fluffed it and we didn't bring in it, we didn't estimate. You know, and so you need to be there and work as the team's conscience to hold them to commitments that they made, and not let them kind of go soft on it, and not deliver on those commitments. And because initially, you know, it's kind of the hardest thing is actually sitting there and actually following a change through, because as individuals especially coming from a traditional kind of command and control environment, you can kind of feel like, well, no one's giving me permission to do this, you know, it's all a bit big and brave in a way. But it's part of the thing as a coach is to kind of build that self-confidence and that understanding that, you know what, it's all right to actually do some experiments and just look for incremental gains. Okay, so I mentioned earlier this idea about kind of return on involvement. It's about maximising your oomph, as it were, as an agile coach. You know, the idea primarily is that you're not working just with one team, you're potentially working with a number of teams, and you know, you need to be there, getting the most from your engagement with those teams. You know, it's not your job to do the do, your job is to support those guys, support those team members, deliver value for the organization, and that's what your role is. So really, as a coach, what you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize some stuff. You're trying to minimize, which is doing. So you're going to minimize the actual doing the day job, doing the team's work for them. The telling and the directing, yeah, because if I tell people and I direct people, I'm just like a classical, traditional project manager or team manager, telling the team what to do, directing them what to do, and people don't learn that way. They just go, oh, well, what's the point of me coming up with any ideas because I'll get told what to do. So really try and minimize that. giving the team advice. Again, it's what I want to do is I want to get the team to come up with their own solutions for things and to try stuff out, because Agile is this wonderful framework for trying, to be blunt, for trying new stuff out and understanding how effective it is or not, and if it doesn't work, either drop it or tune it. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage our team members to kind of be more self-directing, to actually think about, well, what's our end in mind? Where do we have to get to? What do we need to do to get there? What problems have we got to solve to try and get to where we need to get to? So be self-directing, to be freer, to feel like they can experiment with stuff, and to pull knowledge from the coach and say, coach, we're stuck with this. We've got a challenge with this. We're not sure about this, and start and to kick off those conversations with the coach. And also to feel free, that they can feel that they can kind of delegate to themselves and amongst themselves and basically self-organize themselves. And so the coach is using kind of his or her facilitating, teaching, coaching and mentoring kind of hats, if you like, putting these different hats on as appropriately to try and encourage these more advanced team member kind of behaviors. And really you're trying to jump between these, but you find yourself jumping between different hats. You'll be doing some facilitation, you'll be jumping into teaching mode, you'll then be going into coaching mode and asking questions and trying to get the guys to come up with solutions themselves and closing those into concrete actions. And sometimes you'll be also doing some mentoring kind of on the side, but you're kind of almost where you're most powerful in coaching mode. So that's where you're trying to kind of get yourself back to all the time, is back into coach mode. And really, I guess the kind of end result of all this is what we're trying to build in those team members is better Agile awareness, better Agile knowledge, and the kind of more of a desire and a thirst to change and to experiment, to think of how things might work better, and to take ownership of the of the value they're delivering, take ownership of the whole thing, because at the end of the day it's their team, and they are the guys that make stuff happen. So it's about taking ownership for the direction they go in and the consequences or otherwise of decisions they take. So that kind of, again, in a kind of a nutshell, that's trying to talk about this return on involvement idea there for the coach. I thought I put in here now, this is one or two items that kind of just things that we talk about on the coaching course, which are insanely helpful to not only the role of the coach working well, but also team members, the role of as individual team members working well. And one of these things is emotional intelligence, and this is something that some folks seem to be kind of innately kind of blessed with out of the box, so to speak, and they just do it and get it, and other folk don't get it so well. It can be a bit cloth-eared on the emotional intelligence front, but really what it's all about, it's about, the best way of looking at this is to think in terms of this quadrant starting at the top left at self-awareness, and it's about actually just starting to wire and understand what your feelings are at a particular moment, and as a result potentially what your behaviors are. You might be in a meeting or a discussion with someone, and you're finding it, actually I'm starting to feel really frustrated by this conversation because it doesn't seem like a conversation. They're just trying to talk over me, they're stomping over what I'm trying to say, not listening to what I'm saying. And as a result, you look at your behaviors, and you might find yourself starting to get snappy and short and bad-tempered and potentially aggressive as a result of those feelings. And that's something where you being aware, if you're not aware of your emotions, that's where a conversation might escalate into a conflict. If on the other hand you are aware of your emotions and the consequent kind of wilding behaviors, because there's a lot of sort of fight and flight stuff buried and deep in our brains, and emotions trigger behavioral reactions because of an evolutionary kind of fight or flight thing, and just actually starting to kind of tune into that wiring a bit and being able to short circuit it. It's kind of the self-management thing where you start catching yourself, oh hang on, I know I'm starting to feel frustrated now by this conversation, and I'm starting to bite a bit with my words and my language. Okay, I can actually choose to dial that down a little bit and start thinking about, okay, well, you know, I can have a conflict about this, but I don't need to. There's different ways of dealing with this conversation and actually trying to get to a more effective outcome. And it might be like recognizing this happening, say, you know what, this conversation, we're struggling with this, I think. Why don't we go and get a cup of coffee? Or let's just take 5 and then reconvene, or something like that. Or just trying to open it up and just own up to the situation, how it's making you feel. So you can actually manage your own emotions. And kind of having those tools in the toolbox allows you to start being aware of potentially how others are feeling around you. So actually, it's not just being me and you in this meeting. There's a bunch of other folk in the meeting as well. And what's the emotional kind of temperature with those guys as well? And you can look at, you know, their body language, the way they're sitting, maybe how they're reacting. Are they getting a word in edgeways? Are they even trying to? Are they looking elsewhere? Are they dialed into their phones and ignored, just zoned out? You can kind of become aware of what the emotional temperature is around the room, and again work with that. And lastly, if you kind of get control of your emotions and understand what's going on around you, you can start actually trying to manipulate in a nice manner the relationships in that group. And the great thing about that is if stuff's getting tense, it's just actually sometimes it's not because people are being horrible, nasty. It's just a stage of team development they're in, for example. So you can kind of just take a bit of a step back and just by your very behaviours kind of smooth things over, or step in and start facilitating and just point stuff out and bring stuff up to people's attention and say, look, I know we're getting a bit short here, but it's because we're all passionate about this. Let's start, we've got 2 positions here. Let's start getting them up on the boards. Let's start drawing some pictures. Let's start trying to get a common understanding of these 2 positions and work our way to an answer. So you can kind of step in and use this emotional intelligence to help you forward. Communication is really interesting. And this is really, I've got this here as a precursor to briefly talking about active listening. And the point here I'm trying to make is that when 2 people talk, team member and coach, for example, there's an awful lot of thinking and encoding and stuff that goes on in your head to make what you want to think come out as words and body language. And as me as a coach, I'll receive all that information and I'll have to decode it and kind of think of my response. But I'll receive it through a whole bunch of noise and interference, which might be physical noise and interference because of the environment I'm in. Someone else on their phone ringing really loud, conversations going on to the left, which I'm half listening to. It might be my own baggage in my head, me trying to think of an answer to what I'm thinking you're saying, rather than concentrating on what you're saying. So you kind of get this loop of actually quite complicated stuff going on when 2 people attempt to have a conversation. And this is where we talk about listening, and listening is a massive skill for the coach to take on board. Active listening and passive listening. Passive listening is just basically kind of you're pretty zoned out, someone's talking at you, and you might be thinking about that discussion you had just before you left for work with your kids, and it was a bit stressful because there was a ridiculous gunfight going on at home, the person who cut you up on the way to work, the stuff you got to do in the next meeting which you haven't prepared for yet, all this other stuff, rather than paying attention to the person who is talking with you. And the key to listening effectively and getting the most from a conversation is active listening. So it's actually trying to tune out and all that other stuff, all those interactions, to pay real attention, not only on what the person is saying, but what their body language is telling you as well. So actively absorbing the information and then showing you're listening and they are interested by actually looking at them, engaging eye contact, nodding at them, maybe saying, yes, okay, that's interesting, I understand. Feeding back to the speaker, well, what I think you're saying is this, am I right? If I'm wrong, that's fine. And having a little bit of a conversation that's about clarification and getting to the point where you understand what the other person was saying. And be careful, that's not the same as agreeing. It doesn't mean you've agreed with the person, but you both have a consistent and common understanding of what was said then, which is kind of a powerful place to be to avoid misunderstandings. Coaching people we've talked about there, coaching teams is kind of a whole build on the people thing. And I guess the key to this is the fact that teams move through a kind of team development stage. When you put a bunch of people together, they're often in this kind of state, they're forming. So the conversations often it's just fairly neutral. People are kind of fairly well behaved. They don't understand where the boundaries are. They don't understand who the stronger personalities are, who the people who are more the analyst type, who are the more driving forward pushing forward type of folk. You know, they haven't worked out how everyone fits. But as we start understanding people, we'll move into kind of storming, where we start expressing our own opinions, potentially quite assertively, and it's become a bit of a competition about different views and different approaches. Hopefully eventually we'll get through that and we'll start accommodating each other a bit more and understanding where our strengths and weaknesses are, and that's a norming. We're working together more effectively, and then we move into performing, and that's where we really start accommodating each other and almost self-assigning each other to you know, the most effective you know, tasks and the tasks that we have, and do, you know, working best according to our skills. And so there's a whole bunch of coach techniques we'll get in to actually help move a team quickly through that forming, storming, norming, performing kind of curve, and help them move through that, because really it's when the team is performing that we're working as the most, you know, as a higher performance team, and we're delivering and we're more effective as a team, and that's where we want to be, and we want to get there as fast as possible. So we'll apply our coach skills to work through there, and the stuff down the left hand side is a whole bunch of things that we'll kind of learn to do. I've checked this a couple of things that we kind of do, and this is one of the exercises we do on our coach course, and it's something that you can go and take away and just try for your own teams. And this is a lovely little exercise just for helping team members get to know each other. You kind of, what you need for it is you just need a bit of space. You need something to sit in the middle of the group. You can see there on the floor, and the idea is you just have a whole bunch of canned questions. There's some suggestions on the left hand side, and you have someone who facilitates, reads out the questions, and basically the idea is a team member stands next to the thing in the middle. Basically means they agree with it strongly. If the further they step away, the less they agree with it. So it gives you this kind of like visual kind of spider diagram thing as you see people moving into different positions to in response to the questions, and it can just bring up some nice conversations about, gosh, you know, I didn't realize that you were a bit of a perfectionist like that, or I didn't realize I was such a perfectionist, and until now I think about it. Or, gosh, you like to facilitate, that's fantastic, because I really find that quite uncomfortable. As you can see, I was right, you know, I was well away, and you were right, you know, you were right in the centre there. So it can bring out some real kind of, you know, nice eye-openers between team members there, which can be kind of helpful, just in that little thing of helping people get to know each other, which is a little step to moving up that, through that forming, storming, norming curve a little bit faster. Something else I like to put in on my coaching class is that I try and fit in a little coaching dojo, which is just an opportunity just to practice the mechanics of coaching. We run a whole bunch of case studies as well, which are kind of more, kind of in a way, a bit more formal. They're fun, but they're running through case studies. But the idea of the coaching dojo is actually you just sit there and you just say, okay, here's a problem I've got to work. And literally, you have the coach, you have someone there who's in coach role, someone in seeker role. Seeker role has the problem, which they then share. The coach then uses listening, questioning, and clarifying skills just to work that person through the coaching conversation. And then the observer observes and feeds back, and then we swap roles. And we kind of run it quite fast, because it's not necessarily about getting to solutions, but it's about getting to, you know, just exercising those coaching skills. So it's often quite a nice little exercise to fit in. And again, it's something you could just play with, you know, back at work. So that's kind of gone through a bunch of the various techniques and things we bring up on the coaching class. And this we then talk about certification, and really this kind of certification route we're following is the one that's articulated by IC Agile, and they've come up with basically a number of different these kind of fan blades, which talk about different kind of core disciplines that kind of get involved in Agile projects. So we've got Agile Coaching kind of in the centre there. We've got things like Agile Testing, focusing on the testing world. We've got DevOps, focusing on the DevOps world. We've got business agility, talking about the actual business itself, and a bunch of other disciplines come in with their own kind of specialist tracks, so to speak. If we just focus in on our Agile Coaching accreditation route, we've kind of got two classes in there. One is Agile Team Facilitator, and the other one is Agile Coaching. The idea really is, I mean, these can work in either way, but the idea is that facilitation is all about those professional facilitation skills, and this is often stuff that people are a little bit vaguely aware of. So this class is about bringing those in and really exploring those in detail, because being a really effective facilitator is fundamental too. It's a fundamental underpinning for being a good coach. The two just fit together so closely, and not only just for to be a good coach, because these are great skills for a product owner, for a scrum master, for business analyst, for any of those sorts of roles. Being a good facilitator, an effective facilitator, is real power. So we've got the coaching class, which is about, we've been talking a little bit about in the slides previously, and then lastly, they're just all they are is classroom sessions with a certification which is granted at the end of the class. The real killer though is IC Agile Certified Expert, and this is something that's delivered only, it's a competence-based award. So to actually go for this, you need to have done the kind of academic stuff beneath it in the FAM, which is the coaching and facilitation class. You also need to have then tracked up a reasonable, it's something like 6 or 12 months of experience then as an Agile coach. You'll then put your own case studies together. You'll record some videos or audios of you actually doing some coaching in some different scenarios, submit those to a panel, and then basically a panel of industry experts will be formed, will get together, and then they'll go over this stuff you submitted, and then they'll put together a video session, and you'll actually be given some coaching to do in the video session with one or two of those experts acting as a kind of pretend team member or whatever. You will coach them through a number of areas which you won't be told about beforehand. So it really is mimicking that kind of real world environment where there's a problem here, a challenge here, bang, straight in, need to address it. So it's kind of powerful thing, I think. And then just to finish off, we have a coaching class running on the 1st of October this year down in London. It's called the Agile Team Coach Training. So that's the second item on that fan blade, the Agile Coaching course. And really it's 3 days, but they're insanely full and insanely fun as well. Loads of discussion, loads of practical exercises. And if you're interested in taking this stuff forward, I would really commend that to you. So I think that's me now. So if we want to hand over to any questions, I think we've still got time left for questions. So be absolutely delighted to take any questions from anyone at all.
Thank you, Graham. Much appreciated for the webinar. We've got a question just come in actually. The first question, what's the difference between a Scrum Master and an Agile Coach?
Okay, that's a good question. I guess the real difference is typically a Scrum Master is focused on the one team, which is their team, and they're playing the role of sort of facilitator and guide for that team. I think in principle what we've got there is we've got kind of a smooth segue from Scrum Master into team facilitator into coach if an individual wants to walk that path. And I think what IC Agile have attempted to do with that kind of coaching roadmap, as it were, is to kind of articulate what that journey might be like and what extra skills ought to come into the play to allow that Scrum Master to grow personally, such that they can start taking that step back and start, really seeing that Agile journey and having the tools in their toolbox, so to speak, as professional facilitation tools and professional coaching tools to actually really be able to kind of demonstrably move their team forward, and then not only just their team but start moving, potentially other teams as well forward at the same time. So really it's kind of that's the kind of the big difference is it's all those professional skills. And what the class has done is that, to be blunt, they've literally gone out and taken stuff in from the world of professional facilitators, the world of professional coaches in loads of different disciplines, and brought them in and brought them into the agile context, because it all crosses over all this material. It's kind of personal level. I find it quite fascinating how stuff moves over actually. Because I'm actually as a sideline, I'm a kayak and canoe coach, and going through the path there of trying to up my coaching qualifications on that side, so I can kind of go and coach people in those disciplines. And it's fascinating. There's so much overlap in terms of what you're doing, and the way the kayak and canoe world are kind of teaching us how to be coaches, and how in the agile world we're starting to kind of grow up now as well, and pull in the same techniques really.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay.
Got another question coming. If a newbie to Agile Coaching should start with one source or one book, what would that be, like the Agile equivalent of the Phoenix Project in DevOps? I
would go for the one. That's a really good question. The book I love is Lisa Atkins's book, Agile Coaching. I think it's Coaching Agile Teams, I think she calls it. But it's Lisa Atkins, American lady. She's you find her a lot on YouTube. She talks a lot on the conference circuit. She's absolutely superb, and it's a brilliant book. And primarily, I think that the thing that blew me away in the book was because she came from, and she puts her hand up and says, I was that command and control project manager. So she was almost like, when we're often in our teams and we're finding it really hard because we've got a PM who's just given, in a way, giving us a hard time. We're just, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. She was that person. She didn't get it, but then she kind of by accident got involved in some agile work, and it kind of, conversely, it blew her away, and she went down this route then of moving over and learning how to be agile herself, and I guess was self-aware enough to just almost like record all the learnings and the pain points and how hard it was for her to make that progression. And she's put a lot of that in her book, and also a lot of her experience as a professional coach working with teams at all sorts of stages of development. And I think that's absolutely, it's a fascinating book, and I would really recommend it as a read. And it is very readable as well. She's a really good author.
Oh, thank you very much, Graham. Oh,
no problems at all.
Thank you. So I think that's sort of pretty much brought us up to time. Just to mention that we will have a recording available afterwards, and we'll send a link for that in the next few days. Also a link for the Agile Coaching training course Graham mentioned. It's in London the 1st to 3rd of October. So again, thank you everybody for joining, and Graham, thanks for a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.